Welcome to Aquarian Anarchy, everybody. We have one of my favorite human beings on the whole planet joining us tonight, Taylor Madden. I don't know, he's the lightning rod that started the Grifties, and he's a whole bunch of other things. We've had some really deep conversations about anarchy, about God, about the state, and about just overall freedom. And we cannot wait to get into that with you tonight. Let's go. Our quote for tonight comes from Friedrich Hayek. The argument for liberty is not an argument against organization, which is one of the most powerful tools human reason can employ, but an argument against all exclusive, privileged, monopolistic organization, against the use of coercion to prevent others from doing better. And so that, I don't know, that's a pretty good backdrop to start this this whole conversation off, where we're going to end up heading, because I'm telling you, you're going into the chamber. You're going into the indoctrination chamber. We've had a couple of in-person indoctrination chambers at Hotep Con the last couple of years, but we're going to go on air into the indoctrination chamber tonight. But first, Taylor, want to welcome you aboard and tell you thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. This is, I think, the first podcast I've ever really been on.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, hopefully there will be many more.
Yeah, that's right. So let's start off just, kind of giving everybody the window in. For those of you who don't know, if you just watched the Grifties a couple of weeks ago, the man whose name is, on the director credit and who really kind of organized and coordinated this whole thing for the Grifties is the man in the bottom left corner right now, Taylor Madden. And so we really appreciate you doing that, because that show has been a blast to work on, a blast to watch. And I think it's really gotten legs now, and it's really kind of exploded. So if you don't mind, let's talk about, like, how did you find Hotep Nation, Hotep Jesus, and how did you come about this idea to turn the Grifties? Because we used to just talk about that person deserves a Grifter of the Year award, and then you just popped up and said, well, we could do that as a show. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been following politics for a while now, and politics and philosophy and culture wars and whatnot. And one of the channels that I had enjoyed was a channel called Matt Christensen, or Beauty and the Beta at the time. I think it's a Matt and Blonde show. But the channel is Matt Christensen's. And during the 2020 Chaz revolts or whatever, they said, hey, Hotep Jesus got a chance to interview Raz Simone. And I am definitely a content consumer. I when I hear that type of stuff, I typically don't want to. I want to listen to it for myself. I don't want to get the talking points. I enjoy the talking points, but I want to hear it myself as well. And so I went over to this Hotep Jesus dude's channel and turned on the interview. And the thing that I think was most interesting to me about it is I wanted to hate this guy, not Hotep Jesus, Raz Simone. I wanted to hate this guy. He was the villain in my story. And I didn't. I did have plenty of critiques for him. I'm not going to say he was the hero of the story, but he wasn't the villain that I wanted to paint him out to be. And I enjoyed the interviewer, Hotep Jesus, being able to bring that story out. And so I said, all right, he deserves a follow. And I saw that one of his big, the recurring things was Hotep's been told you. So I started peeking my head into that. And it was kind of on my back burner because I didn't quite get it. So it was, when I exhausted everything else that I'd wanted to watch, I'll flip that one on. And because there was something about it, I didn't quite understand. There was language that I didn't understand. It just took me a little while. It's like getting a taste for coffee. And so I then, over the probably period of 2 or 3 weeks, listening to some of the shows, I was like, all right, I'll try and catch this every Thursday. I'm definitely more interested in the interviews, but I'll try and catch this. And I was, and at one point they said we should do a Grifter Award show, Grifter of the Year. That person deserves it. And I'm like, they're going to do a podcast just like this, and I think this would be a great idea. I'd love to put some actual, effects on that. And that's what I do professionally is I do video effects for the company that I work for. Editing, filming, kind of a one-man show. So it's not the world's biggest stuff, but just, what I can put together. And so I reached out, and the only channel that he had open was Instagram that I could directly message him. And I said, hey, I'd love to be a part of it. And he said, okay, cool. Let's maybe meet sometime. And I got a chance to meet with him and Unc. And I said, this is my pitch. This is the idea. This is kind of what I want it to be. And it was funny. I looked back at what I wrote out, and it kind of is exactly what the show turned out to be. Yeah. So it wasn't a whole lot of deviation from it. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. We're going to have you guys wear tuxes. It's going to be on this type of colored background. It's going to these type of clips, these type of lower thirds and whatnot. And I set to work. And to me, it's been more about the organization of it, of just making sure that the show is in the correct show format. You have your shot list, you have your documentation, you have your whatnot, and that gives the guys room that when they show up to do their shoot, they bring all the comedy, they bring all the content. I'm just putting it in the nice package. And so that's kind of the way it's gone. And Chad, you've been super helpful for even taking more of that off of my hands, and with the other guys that you brought into that this past year, of getting the clips off of my hands so that I can focus on the script, I can focus on the effects, I can focus on the show map and the layout, and meeting with all the different presenters to make sure that they're prepped and ready to go, and then putting it all in a package. And so that's kind of the way that that Grifties, became the Grifties. And as much as everyone gives me credit, I do enjoy the applause. I just put it in the package. I'm the wrapping paper on the wrapping paper on the outside of the gift. The gift inside is the Hotep guys and everyone that presents and whatnot.
Taylor's like BASF. He didn't make the show, but he made it better. So because it probably was going to be just like them sitting there talking about it and like pulling up a list or something, and just kind of doing maybe playing some clips off of Twitter or something, and it would have been cumbersome to try to pull off. But you've made it to where like now it's this flawless, seamless, like it goes from start to finish and it doesn't miss a beat, and it's really beautiful. I've enjoyed watching it. What were you going to say?
Me too.
So so before like hopping over on the Hotep wave, what was like your political ideology? How did you view politics? What side were you repping? Like, and what caught your attention to become more so along the lines of Hotep, if you will?
Sure. So I definitely had a different number of different kind of ways I traveled before I got serious into it. I mean, I grew up in Southern California. Even though I had a lot of conservative leanings, there's a lot of liberal talking points that you're like, oh, well, wouldn't it be good if we had universal health care or something like that? But when I got serious about politics, I was pretty, I don't know, Ben Shapiro-esque. And that's probably the kind of more the direction that I was heading. I do say this, I'm a conservative in my heart. I'm a libertarian in my head. The way I like to define it is I think drugs are bad, but do what you want. It's not up for me to tell you what to do. Just don't bring that into my house. So that's kind of where it is. I mean, in here, it's definitely a conservative, classic, traditional morality, classic, traditional family values, if you will. Conservative, classic, traditional, I guess is the way I'd go. I probably fit in that 1950s mold of the model family type thing. But up here, it's definitely more libertarian. Just because a perfect example of this for me is I don't think transing your kids is a good idea. And if I could find a perfect way that could be outlawed but never have any repercussions on me, maybe I might dabble in that. But the way that I see it is the moment that I say that can't be done, someone's going to come around and say, by the same logic, going to say to me, that can't be done. So I give all authority to the parents, even if they're dumb. dummies.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think largely, I think all of us are very similar in many of what you were saying. For me, I call myself radical, but I'm very into my kids. I'm very into my family, God, all that stuff. Now I have a special spin on a bunch of stuff. I might smoke a joint with my son, but all in all, very similar, lots of conservative values. For me, I think that how this happens, the transition I can see that you're kind of making is you start up, because I think Murray Rothbard's right when he talks about ethics. And what you're doing is you're applying ethics to different portions of your life. And so what you're doing is trying to be consistent. And the more you try to be consistent, the more you'll see as your journey unfolds that to be consistent, you can't fuck with other people. And so that's what led me, at least speaking for myself, to be an anarchist. Is I was like, okay, I'm going to apply this to everything because it's what's the ethical thing, and it's not right to steal. It's not right to tell people what to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. Something that's just a little bit local that I found was interesting was I'm now in the Idaho area. I've been here about or Boise, Idaho area, and I've been here about 3 years. And recently there was a club wanted to buy some land and create a club, and the city was trying to block it. Or a group of people in the city were trying to block it, and they said, well, there's going to be a lot of parking issues, there's going to be some loitering. And I'm looking at that and I was like, we have a whole bunch of churches right here that's going to have the same issues. Everything that every issue that they detailed in the paperwork, they detailed about what a church would do. It's completely different in your headspace, completely different in your ideology. But when it comes back to me, I don't want to say, I'd really like to buy that land and put a church on there, and the city comes after me and says, no, there's going to be loitering, there's going to be parking issues. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe we just let people do what they do and face those consequences.
Right. Well, it kind of comes back to what Jefferson said in that is that that you can't control, and I'm screwing up the quote, but the long of it and short of it is that we don't have control of other people. That's not our purview. And the more, like, if the four of us would, and everybody modeled themselves on the four of us, we're very different people. But if all of us just agreed to not, trample on the other person's life and just pay attention to our own, and everybody followed that, the world would solve all of its problems, because half of what we do is interfering with other motherfuckers.
Well, everybody want to be in somebody's business nowadays because of social media and how accessible everybody is able to put their business out there. So,
right. Now you start talking about some of these social issues, and I find myself, even though I would consider that I've met several transgenders that I have considered friends, but I don't think you should be pushing that shit on a bunch of kids, because, like, one of the things that that goes on is, you were talking about, different issues and stuff. That issue itself goes away without government, because they created that. That was them and the media with a propaganda campaign that created the transgender problems. There's this, we're talking about a decimal point worth of the population. We're not talking about millions of people. Like, if we were talking about women, sure, that's a huge segment of the population. But when we're talking about transgenders, this is a very small amount that they are trying to grow for whatever reason.
Yeah. It's I'm not sure what the I don't know. I've tried to think of, like, what the angle is there, and it seems very much like, hey, what we need to do is not have as many men and not have as many real women, and then we just have, like, this. There's some stuff that's very. The biggest thing for me is the push to try to make it, normalized at very young ages, and all that stuff, where it's, like, pushed in schools and all that, the stuff with the story hour and everything else, where it's very, you can't, they took prayer out of schools, but now you're going to have this prayer to this other stuff. It's just, Like, just why don't we work on the fact that we suck at math?
Well,
Like, that would be really good. That's a good reason to have people at school, is to learn math and science and like learn how to read and shit, you know?
And real history.
Yeah, well,
well,
let's not get into that. What is real history, right? Like, we don't even know what the real history of the last 3 years is. Shit. We try to tell what 2,000 years ago was.
in all honesty, I as much as, you know, my heart says, hey, you were born in this body, and it's probably a good idea to remain in it. My head very much says, do what you want, and do what you think that makes you happy. I just will have the freedom of association to say, hey, maybe I don't want to spend time with you, or maybe I don't want to invite you to this aspect of my life, like the church. Maybe we're friends, maybe we're neighbors, but maybe we don't share a gym, or my wife works at a women's gym, so maybe you don't share that particular gym. And so I just kind of want that freedom of association back, that freedom to associate. But if someone wants to live their life in that way, if they're a close friend and they said, hey, do you want to, same way that if they're a close friend and they said, hey, I'm thinking of trying heroin, I'd say, really, I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe you should reconsider. But at the end of the day, it's not
You're not
my
gonna call the cops on them.
yeah. It's not my life. And if they
question.
face the consequences of their actions in a negative way, as much as a problem it will be for them, and I'll feel sorry for them and hope that I will have given the best advice possible. The only way we've really made progress in human history is we've seen what people have done wrong and then decided to continue to go away from that path. And so we have to let people have the freedom to experiment and to leave. I like I said, I'm very, you know, anti-drug for myself, and whatnot. But I have read that microdosing on mushrooms has had some amazing effects. And I don't think I'm ever going to microdose on mushrooms, even based upon those amazing effects. But I don't want to stop people from the potential human discovery. And maybe my conservative heart was right all along, and actually long term, it's a really stupid idea. Or maybe I'll look back and say, well, at least it was a good idea we let them try, because look at the geniuses that prolific, you know, are around us nowadays.
So
For sure.
with the community that you're around now, do your personal beliefs and traditions somewhat align with it, or do you find that you have to come to the Hotep community to really find people who align with those ideas?
Depends on what you mean by that. If we're talking about more of the anarchist, radical libertarian ways, yeah, there's a lot more people around here that are probably more pro-cop than I am, if you will. I'm on that 50-50 edge of, as Hotep Jesus says, which side are you on, back the blue or at the police? And I'm like, oh, I'm right in the middle. Like, every day's a game changer. I mean, I feel like police is an inevitability, and it's good to have good police. How we define good is the key question, and you know, whatnot. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I guess how you define policing, we have to have some security, if you will, and how we defined that is the big question. But a lot of here, you're going to find a lot more of the Ben Shapiro-esque types. I think that's the good way to describe it, because he is a big paver of that direction. If you want to say neocon, if you want to say traditional conservative, or whatever it is, I think that's what you find out here. And while I probably have, like I said, that conservatarian or something, you know, other, and you know, have these ideals of maybe the police don't belong in that particular criming. Drugs is another great example. I just don't believe in its criminalization. I don't believe in the getting them beforehand. But I you know, getting them before they commit the crime is the I guess the reasoning that they say they want to police drugs. But at the same token, if there's some crackhead that tries to break into my house and he winds up dead, we're all gonna have to live with that, guys, because that was the consequences of
violating your property rights.
Yeah.
Well,
Real quick, I want to dive
Yeah.
into something
Yeah.
about policing. Then you can have it. Chad.
Yeah, because I have the same sort of
Okay,
thing.
go
I have
ahead,
a
Vic.
metaphor. So no, go ahead. You go ahead first.
Okay, so
I'll remember mine because it's an easy one.
Okay, so I wasn't with policing. What I would suggest is we do have the advantage of having an anarchist community on the planet. I know people want to tell you that that's not real, but it is. There is a city. There's actually a few little places, but the best one that I'm aware of is Sharon, Mexico, and Sharon kicked out not only their government but all multinational corporations. And we're not talking about last year. We're talking about, at this point, I think it's 13 years ago. So they have a community. I will grant you, this is a poor community, granted, but it's a community and it is a functioning community. As part of their community, they have a security force that they employ. And they keep in mind what they're doing largely is what I would consider voluntarism. It is not, because most people conflate the idea of not having a government with either being a voluntarist or an anarchist. And you can have a government in a voluntarist or anarchist society. You just cannot have force. You cannot have a government that, and government would be the wrong word. We'd have to come up with something else.
Yeah.
But
a monopolistic state that is tyrannical.
Correct. And but you can have a force that you use for security. In fact, I would say it's probably one of the things you should handle first. And, so I just wanted to point that out, that you do actually have some examples of how that can be done. And there are a variety of theories of how it would be done best, whether it's having a private police force or whatever the solution is. I'm just trying to point out that there are solutions that do not involve, taking black people, throwing them on the ground and choking them until they no longer can breathe.
No, absolutely. No, I agree with that too. I just even in that community, if I go in and start causing trouble, someone's going to put me somewhere, whether it's in the ground or in a cell. Someone's going to put me somewhere. So when I think about policing, my biggest issue with even people saying F the police or defund the police is it's like, you don't want no police, you want to be the police. There's a difference. You want to, I mean, that's not true for everyone. But I mean, I've met anarchist communists, and I'm like, what? That seems an oxymoron to some
They
degree.
definitely want to be the police.
Yeah, that seems oxymoronic. Let's tear down the government so we can build it with me on top. Build it bigger and better. And so I look at that, and I guess that was the kind of the point I was making during that my policing is that yes, there is a necessity for a police force of some sort. It doesn't have to be funded by the country or by the state. It could be way more localized to a community, small, potentially even as this neighborhood.
Well, I used to work at a grocery store, and this was my little example, metaphor, or whatever, and it's probably not perfect. So just take that for what it's worth. But we had a guy, so we had like these spots throughout the store where you could go up on this elevated level and look through the vents and stuff, and you could watch to see if anybody was, because you have a store, there's going to be theft, there'll be people trying to sneak stuff out, whatever. We actually had a few of these things happen where people just were sticking stakes and stuff in their pants and under their shirts and everything. And there actually were a couple of instances where like the person pulled a gun and it became like a gunfight in the thing. And so it was, but if you think about it, what they were doing was the store had its own security, and while they had somebody watching to see if somebody was stealing or anything like that, this wasn't somebody following you around and saying, hey, you're taking a little too long on this aisle, that's going to be $50. Like, that's where we start getting into this other stuff where like you have people harassing people on the side of the road for just random shit. And it's not, this was the store trying to protect its own property. Whereas a lot of what I see in policing is there, especially traffic cops, is there's a lot of just money. Yeah, it's a money grab. It is totally like they are out there raising funds for the department. That's why if you get a ticket, you can go to the mayor's office or the DA's office and plead it down to no inspection sticker or something like that and pay $125. They just want your money.
Yeah.
They don't even care. The same thing with like the cameras. They have these stoplight cameras where one of two things will happen. Either if you just ignore them because they're unenforceable, they'll just send you to collections. You'll get 2 or 3 collections email or letters in the mail, and then that's it. They just leave you alone about it.
It's too expensive to keep hassling you.
Right. But the thing is, a lot of people just pay that because they're like, oh shit, man, I got, and so, but what'll happen is if they're not raising enough money, it has nothing to do with safety. They'll pull the cameras and move them somewhere else where they can try to raise more money. Yeah. So a lot of this stuff is just a shakedown, power and money grab. And that's the difference between protecting your own property and protecting the property of the community and protecting the lives of the community versus doing some of this other stuff that is just it has some pre-crime elements to it, like we've talked about.
No, they most definitely shake people down. I remember when I was working in construction and I'd park my car. I couldn't park it at the place where we had construction at because the lot was filled. And I'd park around the corner and there was signs that would say do not park, and then parking violations from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And I was in between that time slot, and I would most definitely see that guy. And I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? We obviously see that my car, I get here at 6 a.m. on the dot.
Right.
So you can't tell me that I'm violating anything. Matter of fact, I'll back up till 6:01 and then go forward 6:02. So you can't do anything. And they just love taxing people for no reason. Yep. So, I mean, and my theory on everything about policing is you're your own police before the police get there. Like, to be honest, if we were to go back to an idealistic world where everybody had a gun or something like that, not everybody, but majority of people had their own form of protection. They're their first line, opposed to hoping that they'd get there and then not discriminate you against me or something like that. Or I have to wait 30 minutes when they're dragging or getting caught in traffic. But there's good things to police officers. Like, something happens and a detective's on the case. Not everybody's going to act like a detective, but there are times where you would have to be your own police opposed to the police.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Idaho, where we're notorious for being either the first or second state with the most firearms, and so the police here do not do as much work. A lot of the work is done by the citizenry. So much so that the police don't get paid very well out here because there's not a whole lot for them to do. So happens to be an interesting little fact is that a lot of police live here, and they fly back to California to work their shift, or they fly back to whatchamacallit. I have a little bit of personal experience with this. I do happen to know that a number of departments in California have 400 person department will have over 10 people living in my area alone, flying back for their shifts. So that's a common thing, because they want to live out here because they know it's safe, but they can't make the dollars that afford the house out here because policing isn't as big a thing. So they have to fly back there to do their jobs.
Yeah. So I want to dig in real quick. Something you said a little while ago before we went off on the policing stuff, as it relates to anarcho-communists. And this is just kind of to clarify, because I think a lot of people, and I've been guilty of this as well, would link the whole Antifa thing to anarcho-communism. That's actually two different things. And when I talk about anarcho-communism, I'm not talking about Antifa. I'm talking about people. And Nicco's acquaintance that we interviewed a little over a year ago, who was a communist, would make this argument that Marx was a bit of an anarchist. And there's truth to that. He saw a world without a state. And what, from my perspective, I'm not an anarcho-communist, just to be clear.
He's lying. Look at that red hood he's wearing.
I know. But their idea, and largely my impact from anarcho-communism comes from Emma Goldman, who I find very enlightening. But she was a real anarcho-communist. She believed that people, if you got rid of the state, that people would choose to work communally, to where everyone would put all their stuff in the middle, and they would choose to work that way. And to her defense, it definitely works for the Amish, because they would fall largely under the anarcho-communist banner, because they don't recognize government, and they say, fuck the government, we're going to do what we do, but they also have a communist economy. So I personally don't think that's how things would work without a state. But we haven't not had a state, so maybe it would work that way. So I
think somebody like, what was that guy, Matt Keenel or whatever, the kid, that dude that was at the convention in 2018 that tried to ruin Josh's chances by just attacking him. Like, he was one of those, like, shoot your landlord kind of people. Like, he brings the I don't know. He's not the anarcho is nowhere to be found in that, because it's just like, it's all about like violently initiating force to get your way and to create the type of, and that's, I think, what Taylor was talking about. So I think what you have to distinguish is there are some people who will claim to be anarcho-communists, and they conflate anarcho-communism with what is actually just this violent, like the guy we were talking about before we came on, Che Guevara, type of communism. But I want to take an opportunity now, because I don't know. You started to say something. Do you want to chime in?
Me, I was just saying that. I mean, yes, we play with the terms a little bit, and to some degree, I'm a communist in this household. I bring in all, not all the money, but majority of the money, and everyone eats collectively. But I wouldn't even extend that past my church, and just I'm my neighborhood is great, but we don't all share the same values. Even my churches, I'm in too big of a church that I think that type of thing would even work. But the point being is that there's only a small amount of community that I'd be willing to do that in. After that, it's to share a country with you, I don't want to have to share too much with you. I have to share some basics. To share a state with you, maybe a little bit more, but not much more. To share a city with you, maybe a little bit more, not much more. Once you start getting into my community, my church, my family, I have to share a lot with you in order for you to be accepted into that. And granted, there are plenty of people that I have accepted as family members that aren't blood relatives or married in, but I've considered them like family. They're staying here with me now as they're figuring out different portions of their lives. And as soon as they leave, another family's coming in. But yeah, there's definitely, people like that, and we can live communally. But as far as my thoughts on communism as it's thought as a state entity, I get rid of that.
Well, in some ways, we have communism kind of forced on us in school when we have to do these group projects where you got 4 people. One person doesn't do anything. Another person doesn't want to get a bad grade, so they carry the project. And you got another couple of people who, if you drag them kicking and screaming, they'll do like the bare minimum of what they can pull off, and you're all sharing a grade. And so when you start to get to larger and larger groups where you don't actually get to choose who is in your little inner circle and who's not, and it starts kind of being chosen for you because it's so big that you can't possibly vet to be able to choose, you end up sort of assuming, like a church even, right? Yeah. You assume that all these people have the same values as you, but then you find out there's parasites in there too. There's people who use they'll use the name of God to rip you off.
Yeah.
And they're hypocrites and horrible people who do this stuff, but they're leveraging your trust. And so that's where, like, this comes down to a trust thing, I think, where when you get outside of where you're out on this limb to trust someone with, like, not putting you in a prison or not stealing all your stuff or not killing you or doing something to your kids, it starts to get really, really precarious. And that's, I think, the key for that. So, you and I have had a couple of pretty deep conversations the last couple of Hotep cons. You described it as a I don't know, like an in-person Aquarian Anarchy Indoctrination chamber. We're not going to take you to the chamber just yet. First, I want to establish kind of what we did, like where you started off, because Nicco kind of touched on this a little bit, but like where were you? Because you said like now you're like conservative in here, but you're more libertarian here. Were you always that way, or were you more like kind of like the Ben Shapiro type stuff, where it's he might say some stuff that he's a libertarian, but then you listen to like some of the other things that he says, and it's like, yo, like you really want to go like to war with Iran and whatever, you know, all these other things that that can be. And he was pushing the shots a couple of years ago and bullying people about it and everything. And now he's coming back and being like, okay, my bad, but not really my bad. I was just going on it's other people's fault. It's not my fault. So where were you? And you know, each, you know, HotepCon 2021, HotepCon 2022, how much progress did we make?
I mean, I'd say a lot. I think particularly in the policing environment. I know we just had a conversation about policing, use of force. I definitely, you know, would have called myself probably more in that direct Ben line. I gotta give credit to Ben as much for bringing me into this world. I think he still has a lot of value as he understands things from the book, if you will, of facts. The biggest question is who wrote the book. I mean, it's like Ben. I think that's really the mainstream facts. Ben reads them great. What I've come to find out recently is there's asterisks in that book of facts that go to another book that's banned.
Right.
And that was a metaphor, no book in particular, but
Right.
yeah, that's, I guess, probably where I've gone, particularly with Hotep Nation, with HotepCon, with you in particular, Chad, is the facts that as they presented are not always the way that they are, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things. If I would say that if Ben's list of facts were what they always were, that Reagan was the greatest president of all time, and whatnot, then I think Ben would be absolutely correct. The fact is that when you look at even a president like Reagan, that I admit that I admire in different aspects, he's also probably put in some of the worst things that are possibly imaginable, whether it's the vaccine.
Boards
over vaccines or different aspects. I can't think of anyone off the top, but I remember there's like I was looking at like 3 major strikes on Reagan, and I'm like,
the Mulford Act is one of them. That's where the Black Panthers showed up at California City Hall or at the state capitol or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was basically like, hey, yo, like, let's make gun laws to prevent.
And not to say that the Black Panthers were the nicest people, or I want to have them over for church on Sunday, but they are an American citizen, and an American citizen has this Second Amendment right, and you had no authority to trespass on it, and yet you did.
Well, that's one of the things too that's been, because I'll admit my own blinders, I guess, that I had on was that, like, I believed all the official narrative about the Black Panthers. What the Black Panthers actually was like, they were a neighborhood watch, neighborhood policing. They wanted to take care of their own security. They wanted to secure their own block. They wanted to take care of their own people. And then when they saw, when the powers that be saw how powerful they were at actually solving some of the issues that they had with crime and some of the other stuff, but they were also antagonistic towards the oppressive state, they infiltrated them with a bunch of these, you go look, the COINTELPRO documents are there. They raided an FBI office and found all this stuff out. Like, it's all there. Like, the documentation is there that they specifically went out there and created through agent provocateurs this bad jacketing of the Black Panthers, where they had other people. They had either instigators, or you had some people who would say or do stuff that would, now it's like everybody's associated with that bad behavior, and it puts a stain on the whole Black Panthers movement. So like, even with that, I'm like, I don't know if I would say like maybe the first iteration, I would have them over for dinner. If they would come over for dinner, I don't know. They were kind of there was some justifiable like, fuck Whitey, because they were getting, you know, the white people were not very kind in that era, to them. But at the same time,
in that era,
as it gets, well, I'm saying specifically like in the Black Panther era. Like I'm not saying exclusively. Damn, Nicco. But anyway,
I'm so glad we're over racism.
So anyway, the later era Black Panthers, once they were infiltrated with all the commies and the weirdos that were like trying to do all the shit that ended up happening, that happens to all these different little groups. They did the same thing with some of the other organic movements,
like the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, it happens all the time. So I probably wouldn't want to invite those guys over, like the ones who sold out some of the people who were the leaders in that, Fred Hampton and others. So,
well, and to be clear too, I'm a mellow person. I'm an artist inside. Not to say a warrior can't come out, but there's an artist inside. There's a creative inside. And I want the 1950s backdrop, if you will, of the white picket fence type household. The relationship I have with my children and my wife, maybe not as stereotypical as the, to the moon type thing, but I do recognize the need for warrior men. I'm just not necessarily one of them. They just, or at least not instinctually. If the warrior man, the person that cuts through, the world fights that oppression, that oftentimes they're not the person that I necessarily want to spend time with, but I appreciate what they bring to this world. I'd like to say it like this: many great men aren't good men, and I like to surround myself with a lot more good men. And just because they're not, they do great things in history and whatnot, and they might not be welcome as welcome at my own dinner table, including the leaders that I've come to respect in history.
So, with the old 1950 model that like you want to kind of run it off of, what are some of the like biggest points that you instill into your kids now that are being instilled to kids in this generation that you're trying to, like, I guess, skew them away from and like keep traditional?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm very much attached to God, if you will, God in the household. Your prayers, your reading out of your Bible, or celebrating biblical characters, whatnot. A lot of the traditional values on how you should treat other people, in the sense of
treat your neighbor as you treat yourself.
Golden rule type stuff. But I very much live and like to live in the world of I get up, I wake up, I cook, make a pot of coffee, I do my 9 to 5 work where I'm doing. My wife's taking care of the kid, because I have a daughter that's 1.5, so that's hope to have a lot more. So a lot of those morals and ethics we haven't quite got there yet, because we're working on our ABCs. Not even the ABCs. We're working on words right now. We get excited when we get words. The go to church every Sunday, involve yourself in some community where you're serving, volunteering at least once a month type thing. You're tithing once a week. You're finding another activity that you can be a part of, whether that's a sport or whether that's a club or something. And the hobbies that you include yourself in, if you will, are limited, in the sense of I'm a video game player. I like to go surfing. I like water type sports, I don't really travel into the even the bar scene. I mean, I might go to a karaoke thing. My family has bars. I'm not anti-bar. That's how I was raised. I'm just not a part of that. I'm not a part of the club scene. I've worked at clubs. I've done that. It's never been a part of the place that I want to surround myself or the people that I want to surround myself. And I'm not even knocking them, knocking the people in those scenes. I just don't think it's worked for me. And this is this is the lifestyle I plan on raising my kids into.
Nice. So the thing is, I'm very similar in my, even though, I talk about smoking weed and I do this and that, I'm very similar. I like the picket fence, idea. Now my picket fence might be tie-dyed, but, and I might have some Grateful Dead bears floating around here and there, but all in all, I agree with all of that. And then I think that I've been, and Chad's another person that this is very true of, the kind of traditional values that you're talking about raising your child with. I've got 4 kids raised with those kinds of traditional values. Granted, I'm a weirdo. I will, but I still taught my kids to respect their elders. I still taught my kids to love God with all of their heart. I still taught my kids to respect people and, open doors for people and don't beat up people, those kinds of things. So what I find good about that is that like I said, I have 4 kids. Chad has, well, you have 3 kids, right?
3,
Chad?
yeah. 3.
And Chad has 3 kids that we raised very similar to what you're talking about. My oldest daughter is 30 years old, and they all have balanced, loving, wonderful lives. Maybe Anya, who's my youngest, she's just getting ready to turn 13, and maybe she'll wind up being retarded somehow. I don't know.
I love you, Anya. I won't accept this slander. I won't accept this slander.
Maybe she'll screw up because she's still got time, but the other kids have come out great. And so I think you're on the right track with that, because I mean, what you're talking about is teaching your kids values. That's the largest problem culturally, is that, my granddaughter, and I love her, but I have a granddaughter that's about the same age, and I'm not trying to throw Skyla under the bus, but one of the things that irritated me when she came over last was we'd go to a store, and everybody in my direct family, like when I go through a door, I hold the door for the next person, right? And that's something I learned as a kid to do. She doesn't. She just walked right out. Thanks for holding the door for me, and moved around. And I'm like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, no.
I had that last night at one of the games that I went to. I'm holding the door open, and like 8 people walked through the door. Nobody touched the door. I'm like, I'm not standing here all night to hold it open for all of y'all. That's back to the thing we were talking about, like this parasitic nature that people have, where it's like, I was raised to be one of those people that, like, if somebody held the door open for me, I'm gonna hold the door and be like, I got it. Thank you. I got it. And then I'll hold it for the next person. Then hopefully they'll do the same thing. I try to be deferential and be like, okay, look, I don't know how you were raised. I'm not going to like criticize you or anything like that, but damn, it'd be cool if you'd have held the door, taken the door from my hand so I could go to my car. It's just wild.
Well, a lot of the things that I think we're talking about right here, at least, is what I would have considered, with the exception of the religious angle on this, would be the bare minimum of Americanness for the most part. I mean, I saw that growing up in Southern California, in Orange County in particular. For the most part, there was a few shady areas, not to throw shade at LA or Santa Ana in particular, but there were some areas where, yes, you would see majority of them even acting the American values as well, but there was people that were taking advantage of that, particularly in theft.
Like the shit you see now with Walgreens and stuff, where people are just running in and they're like, "Hey, they made it to where we can steal $1,200 worth of stuff now. Let's go."
Yeah, and I grew up I'll share this. I grew up in Irvine. Irvine is notoriously the safest city in America. As a city was defined, I think, by population or whatever. They had some draconian aspects to them. The fact of the matter is, if you looked homeless, they'd put you in a cop car, drive you a couple miles, and drop you off. That was kind of their tradition. So much so that I was a swimmer. A buddy of mine had long swimming hair, ratty jeans and a long hairdo, and he was walking home, and cop pulls over and says, "Hey, do you belong in this neighborhood?" type thing. And
Some
it's like, yeah,
first blood type stuff. Sylvester Stallone,
yeah.
Where are you going?
But that was the area that I grew up in, and I'm not going to say that was the appropriate response, but at the very least, the trains ran on time. At the very least, there wasn't that criminality.
They did Mussolini.
I was gonna say, you know who else ran the train?
Yes, I know. But the point being is that when I left, that was no longer the case. There was not the shared values, there was not the lack of criminality, but the draconianness remained. And so,
which is a great powder keg for some explosive stuff to happen.
Yes, and the walls of Orange County have crept in to the point where my dad grew up in Anaheim, California. Anaheim is a great place, so much so that they decided to build Disneyland and the Ducks and the Angels, and it was a poppin' place. And now, my dad's childhood house. My grandma passed, but it's still there. He still owns the house. And it's in a little neighborhood where if you walk right outside the neighborhood, literally two houses down from it, it's littered with needles, and you're just like, that's not the area that my dad grew up in, and that border of criminality, if you will, has come to where my mom currently lives. So much so that we'd never had a stabbing. And last week there was a stabbing at the top of the neighborhood that my mom's in. She's like, I gotta get a gun. She was never needed one. It was just there was no need for it. There was just too many good neighbors that you wouldn't need any reason to have self protection. And now it's coming to that point. And I left in particular for state issues, but the price of the home. My grandparents live in the same neighborhood that my mom lives in. My grandparents bought their home for $50,000 in 1980. My mom bought hers for $600,000 in 2004. And now both of those homes are worth over $1 million, maybe 1.2. Wow. And starting off as a new family, newly married. That was not the lifestyle that I was going to be able to raise those kids in. So where I was going to be going to is, if I was going to stay there, would definitely be the shadier parts of town, just because, or I'd have to stay with mom. And so instead we decided that we wanted to move to a state that had a little bit more opportunities, and particularly, one thing that we have, we decided not to vaccinate. And that was, a choice based upon my wife's family's medical history that they discovered way before she was born, that they had sensitivities to it. So we made a decision that we don't want to do that for our children. And the California passed laws that said you don't have that option anymore, particularly if you're going to public school. But all exemptions are out on public school, and they're coming in on private school and homeschooling. Mm-hmm. And that was a big reason we moved to Idaho, which kind of leads back into my thing about trans. Is some people might say that I'm an unfit parent because of the decisions that I've researched, that we've researched, that history of her entire family who have doctorates researching, and deciding that they that wasn't the decision for them. And someone might call me unfit as a parent. So if I say that medical decision isn't right for those parents, when's that going to get turned around to me, even if I'm right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really falls down to force. So as you've grown and you've talked about your relationship with Christ and a little bit about the religious stuff, how does your religious views inform your views as it relates to freedom?
I mean, it's definitely the top tier. I've always considered politics as philosophy in action, and philosophy is to me defined by the theology of what is our purpose in this world, and where did we come from, where are we going, and then how do we live in the philosophy of it, and down to how politics of how are we going to let someone tell me, or how are we going to tell other people how to live. And for the most part, I mean, I very much agree with the the national level politics of leave me alone. But in my, politics is everywhere. Politics is in your family. Politics is in your church. It's just when we say the word politics, we think about the high level
state
politics
issues and all that other shit.
Yeah, we think about that, but convincing people that this is the right decision. And there's politics between me and my wife. If I said I read this, I thought this, how do I get you on board? That's a kind of a political persuasion of some sort. And who makes the final decision? And that's, for us, that's biblical. I tend to want to have her make the final decision. But the Bible says to us that it's the man's job. So she says, you make the final decision. We talk about it, we discuss as a team, but she's going to follow me. And so I think that's some of how that is directed by Christ, because the things that are stated in the Bible, even when it's not convenient, we tend to follow towards.
To me, that's kind of almost the point a lot to any kind of religious conviction is it's not really the point, but to be able to stand against, because to go to, I'm trying to like put the what I'm trying to say into
connect the dots.
But to a large degree, when. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to put this in a frame, but religiously, often what we do is try to like buck the traditions of the world, if you will. Often, for instance, when, it was customary to stone prostitutes. Jesus is telling them not to do that shit. When it's the custom in society for there to be these bankers, and these bankers are getting money off of the religious people, Jesus went in and threw the tables over. These are the kinds of things, and that's just using that religion. There's examples everywhere else. And I think a lot of that is because, though we are physical beings, and I think that's a part of who we are, we're actually, in my opinion, we are spiritual beings experiencing a physical reality. And because of that, the rules are different. And that's what's good for having a faith is that you kind of get a view of what you think the rule books, whether you're talking an actual book or just a philosophy, are, and you try to model that behind it. But every time that you stand on some kind of faith-based stand, regardless of what that is, there is some physical entity, usually government, who is trying to get you to go against what your faith tells you to.
They're trying to replace it. Yeah,
right.
I think that's the biggest. I don't know. The failing of man is that in that, and this like hits on that exactly, is we try to make God in our image instead of recognizing that we're made in His, and trying to like live the direction. Like Taylor said, why am I here? What is my purpose for existence, and where am I going? If you think in those terms, then you necessarily have to follow the blueprint, even if you want to go do something else that's going to take you off of that path. And that's where, like, so much of this stuff, it comes down to appealing to our passionate nature. It appeals to our pride, our lust, our greed, our envy, all these things that draw us off of the direction, because now we're chasing something for ourselves that is, again, we're trying to say, like, well, yeah, I can have God and this. Like, and it's like, no, like if God's telling you, like, hey, you come here, and like the rich young man, he says, go home and sell all you have and give to the poor, and then come and follow me. And he went home sad because he had many things. Like that's the offer before us. And you're seeing a lot of that start to come now with a lot of this artificial intelligence stuff, and with a lot of this stuff coming out of the WEF, is so much of it is being sold as like, we are going to live heaven on earth.
Yeah.
We're going to have heaven on earth. We're going to have all the things you could want. And it goes back to the temptations of Jesus in the desert, where it's like, hey, you can have all of this. Just kneel down to me.
Yeah.
And worship me. And people are choosing to worship it.
Well, and I even in that, I mean, I think one of the things that they are looking for, they being, whether it's America, whether it's the WEF, is ultimate security, and where to set your borders, and where are your boundaries. And I mean, I'd say from the micro to policing to the macro armies, it's where are your borders. I mean, if conflict, I'm not a pacifist. If someone brings conflict to your doorstep, you might have to act. But where is your doorstep? It ends here. And I see a lot of these. The way that I see them is they're looking for that ultimate security of, if we pushed our doorstep farther and farther, if we put the gates where we could suffer, then there's no possible way someone could come in and threaten us. And I just don't think, one, that's an inevitability, and two, personally, I will do things like have firearms in this house. I will do things like put up, be in a good neighborhood, and whatnot. But some crazy might come in here or bigger, a police force or the state might come in here and take that away from me. But that's not where my ultimate security is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the lives of the martyrs and saints, there are plenty of them who they die torturous deaths, where they have their feet cut off, their hands cut off, they're skinned alive and then burned alive, and then they somehow come out of it like unscathed, and then they like convert the whole the king that was trying to kill them and everything else. Like it's sometimes it's holding fast to that thing that's difficult, but that is the right thing to do, and not falling for the, oh well, but if you just do this, if you just kneel down before me and worship me, I'll give you all this stuff. Sometimes it takes just saying like, no, I'm not going to do that. All right, so I want to start transitioning to taking you into the chamber. But before we do that, I have to recount a little story that happened today. Marcus and Nicco know about this, but I got to let everybody know and give this man
Chad's
a shout out.
famous.
Give this give this man a shout out. So I go to the store today and I'm walking out, and somebody walks by me and they go, Chad? I was like, yeah. He goes, I follow you on Twitter. It's like, oh shit. And he's like, I watch your show, Great Anarchy. Like, I love the show. Anyway, I was like, what's your name? And he's like, I'm Sixth Book on Twitter. And this is somebody that Marcus and I and Nicco interacted with a lot on Twitter and everything. And so
Twitter friend.
Yeah, Twitter friend. Exactly. But it's just cool to see. Because like I know you talked about how you came at this from the standpoint of like you were following these things and these influencers, however you want to call them, people who had good ideas, and you could tell were thinking and weren't excuse me. All right. Anyway, sorry. Weren't just towing the party line or gobbling up the official narratives or anything like that. And you have turned that into, now you're at HotepCon every year, and you're doing this stuff with the Grifties, doing all this stuff. And so we're bringing that social media digital world into in-person interactions. It was just really cool to have that happen organically today, where I was just like, I didn't even know you lived here. What the hell? This is crazy. So I'm officially a Q list celebrity.
That's right.
Q might not be far enough down the alphabet, though. So shout out to Sixth Book.
For sure.
Sixth
Good
Book,
dude. Go follow him.
Yeah, this is this Aquarian Anarchy Indoctrination Chamber is sponsored by Sixth Book. He didn't pay me to do this, but I'm just giving him the free sponsorship. So here we go. Avert your eyes if you have epilepsy or any kind of thing that might cause you seizures or anything like that.
Trash bag right next to you.
Here we go.
Look directly into the center of the screen. Seizures are welcome.
All right, so Taylor, welcome to the officially the Aquarian Anarchy Indoctrination Chamber. I'm going to let Marcus start this off, because Marcus usually has the best first question out of the gate, and then Nicco and I can just kind of vibe off.
Yeah, we just riffed off of it.
All right. So, what would you say is your most statist opinion?
Oh my gosh. Statist opinion.
If you don't answer, we're going to throw you in jail.
I'd say that as a country, we need a military and a police force, and probably a court to figure it out.
Okay, how would you define a military?
God, that's a hard one. How would I define a military? A group of men that are, I mean, people, I guess, but let's be honest, men that are willing to, that are there to use deadly force against a group that wants to use deadly force. Thank you.
Would you mean outside of the United States then?
I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't attack anyone that doesn't try to attack us inside the United States first.
Right, but we're talking about statism. So,
Yeah.
So, but I'm just trying to be. What I'm trying to do is find out how you define military, because I would argue that a militia is more effective against, and I have lots of examples. The what we call the Revolutionary War is probably the biggest one that I can think of.
No standing army. We actually defeated a standing army with no standing army.
I mean, I would 100% agree with that. I'd probably keep military experts though on payroll, but other than that, the actual standing army, I'd probably only have them called to arms.
This is a great question from Sketch. Would your military be funded by force? And that's where, when you get back to the militia, if this is like arm yourself and be ready, and like we can go, we can have training and we can get ready for this stuff to be able to defend ourselves and defend the homeland and all that. When you look at the military industrial complex, it is set up to confiscate people's hard-earned money, to fund endless wars, because endless wars are a big moneymaker for Raytheon, Northrop Grumman. Like, you go through all the different weapons manufacturers, BlackRock, all the different weapons manufacturers, and these firms that manage all these different companies that leverage taxpayer dollars, and I hate to even say stolen money,
Right.
to perpetuate these wars all over the world. That's why it has become like it is because we put in a standing army. Now, well, you got to keep funding it. And if you know anything about like budgeting, and when you work for a company, if you work in a department and they come at the end of the year and they say, hey, we gave you $175,000 to run this department and you only spent $48,000. I guess we're just going to give you $50,000 this year. So what happens is, departments in companies all over the country, and especially in government, they have to, it's called baseline budgeting. They have to continue to spend at least as much, and probably, 5, 10, 20% more, just to keep the gravy train coming.
Right.
So let me ask, because taxing is an interesting thing. I know we have had many different tax types in this country, and I could say that I would say that I'm a believer in that the Laffer curve that we far exceeded, that we're taxing more to gain less. So we're stealing everyone's money, and we're not even, even from the statist point of view, we're not even collecting the optimal amount of money, as we're stealing a higher percentage of it. But let's say we took my model of just having a couple generals on staff. How would we pay them with a tax system? I would think that we would need some form of being able to generate dollars for an organizing force, whether it's a organizing government, whether it's a judge. So that might be my most statist view, is, while I would strip most of the taxes that I'm being taxed by today, I would assume that we would need at least some way of generating revenue for an organizing force we'll loosely call a government.
Yeah, Sketch brings up a good point. Lottery is a great way to raise funds voluntarily.
So I want to push back. Why do you need a paper pusher? And now I'm guessing that by general, you're meaning somebody who is trained in tactical things, things like that, not the actual title, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Do you not think that you can't pick that up in a private manner?
I guess you could in a militia hire the most correct person, but I mean I imagine if we're living in a peaceful utopia of some sort and some
Utopia is impossible, though.
I totally understand, but we're living in a peaceful way where we do not need a military force and someone attacks us. The scrambling of trying to find the right man to do the right job would be ill-advantaged rather than having someone that not only is already studying these things that we've already have a community faith in, but is also looking on the horizon to see the type of moves that another country is making. Like, for instance, right now, if we didn't have a military, I'd be calling the militia up right now based upon the things that are happening in Taiwan and the things that are happening with the spy balloon. I might be saying, hey, let's rally around that right now. Not to say that we would go or not defend Taiwan, but in case that conflict comes to us, I want to be able to respond semi-quickly.
Sure.
You know?
Now, the first thing I want to point out is that Taiwan should be able to defend themselves, and that's their issue and their thing. Just like in Ukraine, whatever, and they would be defending themselves, ethically. They would be defending themselves as they will. But I want to tell you a real quick story. Around just after the Civil War, there was 1/5 of the continental United States was owned largely, at least it was considered a territory controlled by the Sioux Nation. 1/5 of the American of the American landmass was controlled by the Sioux Nation. And they did not have a military, nor did they have a elected leadership. And there was no one who was in charge. They were completely and totally a voluntary system. You can go read history books and find that out. I can give you there's a book written about Red Cloud, who is one of the primary leaders. Anyhow, they did not have those kinds of things. Yet they defeated soundly the American war machine in a 2-year war. The United States had to surrender to Red Cloud and the Sioux Nation unconditionally and give all things that they were taking. Now, of course, eventually time would go on and they would eventually beat the Sioux. But the facts are, and this was after Red Cloud retired and several years later with Sitting Bull and all of that. But Red Cloud defeated what could be arguably one of the top 10 largest and most advanced militaries on the planet at the time with sticks, stones, and spears. So my opinion as an anarchist is that we don't need a military, because good luck if this whole country decided that we are not going to be governed with the weapons, because one of the things people forget is, like, when they're talking about who's going to build the roads aren't going to leave if we decide to not have a government paying for them and raping 90% of the cost out of people's wallets. The roads aren't going to go away. The military equipment that we currently have is not going to go away. We're still going to possess that as a country. And so if, let's say, not likely to happen, but let's say in the next few years, the United States has a revolution and we localize, like I would suggest.
Not likely?
Well, okay, have a revolution that equals more freedom.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. So if we were to do that, and we were to have an anarchist revolution in this country, which would be peaceful by definition, because anarchists are peaceful. If that were to happen, and China or Russia or any of these other assholes decided to come into this country, do you think for 3 minutes they'd be able to defeat us if we kicked out the largest empire the world has ever known?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of tendencies towards I guess statism, in the sense of it's the only thing that I would say I've known or studied.
Sure.
You have to think about that for a second, because anarchism is exploring a very foreign idea that it's like learning a new language that I speak as a third grader. Not even just the concepts. Third grader's probably too high. 2-year-old, just the concepts of it. But yeah, I mean, I'm. You might be right.
So that was my question. Chad, do you want to take the next one, or do you want?
Yeah.
Or do you want it?
I can let Nicco go.
Oh, so my question is how much authority should the state have over you?
How much authority should the state have over you? I think that the state should serve 3 functions. The military, although Nicco was trying to get me off that one. The policing, not what you'd currently call policing, but policing in general. And then the judicial and contract keeping would, the judge. That's probably about it. I'd like to live in a world where maybe it depends on what you define state. If me and my city agreed that we're all going to chip in and we're going to pave the roads, are we okay with that? Because I'm okay with that at a localized level where I know that my vote counts. I'm not okay with it, even my state of Idaho, dealing with my roads, let alone my.
Well, I mean, if you wanna bring it down to like a much smaller, I would consider, even though it's not the proper terminology, I'd consider your community your state. Like whatever your like in-house community is, and you have much more pooling power because you know the people in depth and things like that, then what then the entity overlooming that, what power do they have over your community / state? Like what power should they have over you?
I'm very happy with my HOA. They don't charge ridiculous fees, and they set up nice Christmas lights and keep the park maintained. I'm very happy with my church. It's all completely voluntary. It's a community that I choose to be in. There's theology that they sometimes preach that I'm like, but it's a great place to serve. And I like it more than I'm willing to leave. I get a little bit questionable when it comes to my city saying this club can't be here, like we talked about before. Not to say that I'm a big fan of clubs. I'm not. Not to say that I think it's a great business idea in this area. I don't. But I don't think it's a good thing to tell. Just
so you're saying that they shouldn't have autonomy over where people can place certain things, even though they control.
But I'm okay with them putting up stop signs where they think that they belong, even though I say, damn, this stop sign shouldn't be here. This should be a.
Can't your community decide that though?
Yeah, that is the community of the city deciding that through the representative of the city officials. And while I would have rather the 3 of them left in this most recent election, that was my community, and the best thing I can do is knock on doors and tell them, got to get these 2 out because they're really, really annoying. But they didn't, and I'm not super active, but I do know people that are, and I'm happy with what they did. So I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, on a federal and state level, or on a federal level, probably just the military and organization of interstate issues. On a state level. Probably just judges, and on a city level, I'd be very happy with policing, just as a concept. Yeah, I mean, the good news is I'm not in a very big city. I probably wouldn't even say the same thing about the city I'm from, Irvine, because there's just too many people. When you're looking at, nearing a million people, your voice just doesn't matter as much. But when you're here and you're looking at 2 counties that make up not even 1 million people, you have a lot more of a voice in your city in particular. The two biggest counties are sitting right next to each other, and they make up this area makes up about 1 million people.
And all right, what do you think that you should be taxed on?
Well, probably get rid of property tax right off the bat, because this isn't your property, it's my property. I mean, I definitely, on a tax level, I'd follow Art Laffer, which is the things you want to tax, you want to decrease, and the things you don't want to tax, you want to increase. So I don't want to tax sales. I want more sales. I want more voluntary exchange in that regard. I don't want to tax property ownership. I want more property ownership. Keep buying up, owning property. Fact is, we buy more property, everyone. Get it out of the hands of the state or the federal government. BLM is nice to shoot on. Back here, it's only about 50 miles away. Not organization, the Bureau of so it's nice that there's a bunch of land where you can just shoot on. But I wouldn't be mad about it if it all became in the hands of mostly private property, with the city hall as the only piece of land that the city's owned. I think I'd probably try and bring it back to the constitutional of tariffs, just because it's the only thing that I could see that doesn't violate someone, and you have to generate $1. I'd probably try and bring it back to that as closely. I mean, if I had to take a guess, I'd probably, if I was czar of taxes, I'd abolish income tax, abolish the IRS, and monitor something like a tariff. And bring it down real low, because I want to starve the beast anyways. I'm not quite an anarchist where I'm saying I don't want some of the beast, but it's fat and inefficient, even in its tyranny.
So what you're saying is it becomes more efficient when you add violence, coercion, and murder to a community.
I'd say it becomes more efficient when it doesn't have as much ability to do anything. I mean, this is actually a thing that happens in films and video games as well. If you have a small team, they make the most creative work because they have to think outside the box. But if you throw dollars and big budgets at it, and you're like, well, we'll make this video game. Best video games I've heard come from teams of under 25, where you throw 100 people at the project and you throw tons of dollars, and everyone's just like, well, I'm just going to do my job, and I can't step on this person's toes, or I can't think creatively outside of the box. Right. So I would say that there might be a word for good government, but it'll probably come from ingenuity based on the need of not having dollars to create something, to create a smart governing way to please everyone. That would probably be my idea.
I have the name for your good government. It's called voluntary government, to where everybody chooses to do it, where it becomes not an anarchist community that happens to be governed by a government. Okay, when it stops being that is, let's say, and to be clear, I'm an anarcho-anarchist. I don't have any like real hyphenated to my anarchy. So for me, if Lapel, which is the town that I live in, decided that, and we're in an anarchist society, okay, and they decided they wanted to have this, that, or the other thing, and I just couldn't do it, I'd secede. I would no longer be part of Lapel's community. Now, I live right smack dab in the middle of Lapel. So, I'd live here. I wouldn't have any other choice. But for it to be a voluntary society, to where it's not controlled by murder and coercion and theft, in order for that to not happen, I have to be able to leave. I have to be able to say, you know what? I'm not using your town. You don't hook me up to your electricity. You don't hook me up to your gas. You don't hook me up to all this. I get one road that I can leave the town on because that's only fair. And that's all I use. And that's it. And I need to be, in order for it to be a truly voluntary or anarchist society, I need to be able to secede. I need to be able to leave. And so that's where I would draw the distinction.
I probably agree to that. No, I'm definitely the type that would sign me up. Here's the bill, the bill for the most,
Right.
Most part. And if it got heinous enough that I couldn't, I'd leave. It's not the first time I've left a community. It might not be the last. I hope it's the last, but
Right.
But it's not the first time I've traveled. I've been to different places, not far, but in the States. I've lived in few different places in my young adulthood. I'd go to another one. But yeah, I'd probably agree to that as a concept.
Chad?
All right. So now it's time for the real nitty gritty. If God will not force you into heaven and will not force you to do the things that are in your best interest, but instead gives you free will to make mistakes and fall away from him and choose to not even, have a relationship with him. How does it make sense to, as human beings, compel other human beings to join a community and to live by the rules of a community that may go against their own morals, ethics, or just their desires? And even their needs in some cases.
I mean, I have a hard time answering that question because I'm not sure I even disagree with the premise to some degree. I guess the only thing I could lean on is I do agree with Thomas Jefferson in the sense that this contract that you didn't sign needs to be rewritten by you. I also agree with James Madison contradictorily that said, hey, dude, this was a miracle that we got this far.
But isn't that the Ben Shapiro to Hotep Nation kind of thing, where it's like that was the on ramp to something much more beautiful down the road that you can get to, that you don't have to stay there and just stay in that James Madison construct?
Yeah, I mean, you might. I'm not a professional speaker, that's for sure. I don't have great talking points. I might have thought about a lot of these ideas. You're definitely challenging me, so I appreciate that. I guess to some degree I agree with this sentiment of I'm going to be semi self-policing in the you do you go out, be a part of your community, but then again, if you come crazy and drunk or high and knocking on my door, you might get a shotgun blast through you. But then I think about like my mom, and I know that she doesn't have any of that, and she definitely doesn't have training for it, and she's not that strong of a woman, and she's mostly living, by herself, or has spent a lot of time living by herself. She's got a boyfriend now, but there's often times where she's alone, and I would like there to be someone else looking out for her. I hope it's the neighbors, but they grew up in a very safe town. They're spongy people, soft people as well, not made of hard stuff. Who knows how many of them are carrying type situation. Right. So that's where you get the necessity for police. But I'm in a place that, while I'm in a suburb for sure and it has a police force, it doesn't have the necessity for police. But I think the thing that keeps the crime away more than the gun itself is the churches. The church communities, the community centers, there's multiples of them, but for lack of a better term, I just say the churches, even though the community centers serve largely the same roles as well. I don't know. I don't know necessarily how to get to that point that you were talking about, Chad, of being able to allow everyone to completely be voluntary. But if I would say it would be that completely voluntary communities, churches, do the best job of self-governing and
Agreed.
breeding peace.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, to what you were saying about like the police and like people being spongy or soft or whatever. I think that some of that, let's kind of make sure we get the chicken and the egg in the proper order. I think as the state has become more and more overbearing and has taken care of more and more things for people, people have gotten more soft because there's an expectation that I don't have to be hard. I don't have to be in survival mode because a lot of this other stuff is taken over for me. My sons and I watch this show. I think it's on the History Channel. It's called Alone, where they just drop these people off in like the wilderness, and they get like 10 things. It's like a hatchet and like a bow. Or I mean, they get to pick your 10 things and the clothes on your back, and they give you camera equipment because you are filming yourself. There's no camera crew. There's nobody to like, it's not like Survivor where there's like people following you around. And if you fall and break your ankle, there's somebody watching it happen and they come and hurry up and help you. This is just like, if something happens, the only thing they've got that if you don't make the call to say, hey, I'm okay at the end of every day, then they send somebody out to check and make sure you're not dead. But what I was explaining to my boys is like, you know, you think about it and like we've gotten really, really comfortable. Air conditioning, walls around the house. Like there's so many things that we take completely for granted where you watch these people, they're going out there, they have to build their shelter with their little hatchet and the trees they find in the woods. And they make a lean-to or they make, you know, a little A-frame house or whatever they can make. And they're sometimes like it catches on fire because their fire is in there and the stuff gets dried out. And then it, you know, an ember hits it and it takes off and kills the whole house. These are the kinds of things that as we have gotten more and more comfortable letting other people, and that's why like back to the stuff we were talking about before with whether it's the WEF or the AI stuff or the stuff from the last 3 years, people zooming in to work and all this stuff. People got so comfortable being lazy and being like taken care of and not having to pay rent. You know, you don't have to pay your rent because there's a moratorium on foreclosures and evictions, you know, so you don't have to pay your mortgage or your rent until you do. And then that's when the hammer comes down. So I think that what needs to happen is back to what you were saying. It has to start with like us. I don't think that the way to do this is overthrowing it from the top down. And then we get to figure out freedom. I think where it starts is we start asserting our own freedom and then we start to push back and the parasite recedes.
Amen. So I want to add a couple things to what Chad just said, just from possibly a slightly different perspective. Chad and I don't disagree very often. Frankly, me and Nicco don't disagree very often, but it does happen. One thing that I have argued for, though I agree with Chad's premise and what he was saying, I do need to point out that I believe that becoming anarchist doesn't mean that you need to be self-reliant. I don't think that is essential. I think that it is helpful, and I think that being prepared to weather the loss of the state is important, because I don't think this is probably more of a clarification.
Yeah, because I think the same thing. That I think it's more about building a community that is voluntary.
Correct.
So that you don't have to rely on that stuff. Not so much just I'm going to do this all myself. Go ahead.
Right. But I want to point out that in an anarchist state, in theory, we've not really done this, but in theory, we would get to exactly what we have now, but it would be ran by private organizations and it would be ran by people and all of those kinds of things. It's the transition that's the problem. It's not the onset of anarchy that is the problem. It's the loss of people being used to what do you do about this? Oh, you go to the town hall. The town hall may not be there anymore, at least the DC or your state capital or whatever it is. But the things that we have, there is no reason. Rothbard argued that everything that has ever been provided by the state has been provided by private organizations better and definitely more ethically. Mm-hmm. And so again, I don't think that it's actually a disagreement. I think it's a more of a clarification that yes, in my opinion, when we transition, because I do think that it is a when, I do not think it is an if. I think that the state will fall away eventually. And when that happens, which I don't think is going to happen in my lifetime, but might happen in my kids' life, there's going to be about a 10-year period that's going to fucking suck. It is going to be awful. And it's not really the onset of anarchy, it's the death of the state.
Well, and the many multiples of experiments running before everyone agrees which one was a success. And
right. Yeah, exactly. And I do want to pull this quote up because I think that it will enlighten what, frankly, all of us are trying to say. And even you, Taylor, are saying this in a way. And this is a quote by Murray Rothbard, who's one of my favorites. And I'm going to have to get rid of the banner. So, he's local for the people that are listening. This is about localization. Rothbard says, once one concedes that a single world government is not necessary, then where does one logically stop at the permissibility of separate states? If Canada and the United States can be separate nations without being denounced as in a state of impermissible anarchy, why may not the South secede from the United States? New York State from the Union, New York City from the state. Why may not Manhattan secede? Each neighborhood, each block, each house, each person. That's the process of localization. Sorry, trying to take down the thing.
I got you.
Sorry.
I got you.
Awesome. So,
yeah, well, so the other thing too, I want to clarify something because there are some people in our I don't know, adjacent circles that overlap very. What are you doing?
I was trying to delete something and accidentally hit it. My bad.
No worries. But that are kind of adjacent to Hotep Nation. You know, they think that this is something that was born out of like the 80s and Reagan or the 70s and like, you know, it's like, no, this has been going on for a long time. And what we're not suggesting when we say private organizations is like big corporations like BlackRock and, you know, Meta and, you know, Twitter and Google and all this stuff. No. That's not. Those companies are all living off of the preferential treatment they've gotten from the overwhelming omnipotent state. Okay. And what we're talking about is Hotep Nation is the private organization that we're talking about when we talk about a private organization, not some big globalist corporation that goes to the WEF and gets their marching orders from these psychos. No, we're talking about, when we say private organization, we mean like voluntary organization, sort of like we talked about with the militia, where this is how the American Revolution was fought. It was a bunch of guys who were armed, who grew up hunting and shooting. You know, they were marksmen. They knew how to. They made their own bullets. Like this was a very. They didn't go to the store and buy their guns. You know, a lot of this stuff they were making guns. They were making their own bullets and everything. It's a very different. And I'm not saying we could necessarily go all the way back to, you know, some sort of primitive sort of culture, but we don't have. It doesn't have to be this overarching globalist corporation that we speak of when we speak of a private organization. We're just talking about personal, private, voluntary organization with people who we can get down with.
Well, I'm all for Hotep Nation. I'm you know, huge fan and whatnot. I mean, the only issue with the concept of making Hotep Nation Hotep Stan is the scattering of everyone. The fact is, I'm not leaving Idaho anytime soon. I'm guessing you're not leaving your home state to come build Hotep.
Chicago. I'll leave Chicago.
Yeah, I just met somebody in Hotep Nation this morning.
Well, and I know based upon some of the shoots with HJ out here in Idaho where he tagged it, that we have a lot more Idaho, you know, Hotep Nation fans, if not members, you know, out here in Idaho than
it's only the beginning.
I would have expected. However, you know, and there are other people that share the same worldview that are not a part of Hotep Nation as well. out here, and one of my closer friends out here is definitely active in local local party stuff. I mean, he goes through the Republican Party, if you will, but his allegiances are more to freedom. In fact, it's the Idaho Freedom Foundation that he's more aligned to, and they find, besides the fact that there's not much of a Democrat Party here in Idaho to begin with, that it's changing the party politics of the Republicans that locally that implements freedom. But I mean, I guess my question is, I've met a lot of great anarchists, Hotep, libertarians. You name the layer that they are, and we could live harmoniously, going 50 years down the path of freedom before we come into a true disagreement. But I selfishly, I'd rather all rally around my own city and then maybe my state
right
after that, and that seems to be the biggest setback to that concept.
Sure. But what I think the solution to that is, and hopefully you're doing it there, and I know that I'm doing it here, is and I know Chad and Nicco are doing what they can there too, is build it. I'm doing that. I am reaching out to people in my area. We have a Father's Day party that we do every year that we invite the whole neighborhood into, and there's two purposes of that. I'm fucking weird, and I don't want them to call the cops on me. So that guy Mark's weird, but you know what? He's all right. Is what I'm looking for. So there's that, but also, I've already broached the anarchist subject with a bunch of people, and they're most of the time they're like, okay, and they go on about their business. So for me, I think what we do is we continue to build. And yes, Taylor's going to have his Idaho freedom people, and Chad's going to have his Baton Rouge freedom people, and Nicco's going to have his Chicago freedom people, and I'm going to have my Indiana freedom people. But we can come together like this and say, hey, what worked for you? Maybe Taylor, you managed to get some kind of co-op together for trading food or some shit like that, and it works out. I can go, hey, dude, how the hell did you do that? I want to know how to do that in my community.
Well, to be honest, I think the thing that I want to do is amplify other people's messages, just the same way I hope I'm doing with the Grifties. I'm not hoping not to interfere with the message itself, maybe on an interpersonal level. The fact that I have a relationship with Chad, the fact that I have a relationship with the Hotep Jesus or Canon Hotep, that maybe I have a perspective that changes their mind, or vice versa. But in all honesty, there are plenty of disagreements I have with just the Grifties. I mean, it's a joke in all essence, but of a nominee that we're talking and saying, hey, should this person be nominated? No, that person should. Should this person that should?
Right.
There's plenty of disagreements I have.
Right.
But that's not my place in that message. It's not my place to alter the gift. It's my place to wrap it in the appropriate gift wrap. And so to that extent, my message, my part in the movement is of freedom is to help amplify that message. Sometimes that comes with a nice paycheck in the terms of, I have definitely worked on a few local political campaigns that have paid me, doing their videos for them. And sometimes that comes with not a payment, like I volunteered on the Grifties, but then I have been blessed with gifts from that I didn't come to expect. So I can't say that it wasn't free. It was voluntary. Is that probably the right word? I'm not going to say there wasn't a monetary gift at the end of it, and that was appreciated. But it wasn't like I said.
Wasn't negotiated. Yeah.
Wasn't negotiated. There we go. Yeah, exactly. And so my goal on this is definitely just to expand freedom voices, expand voices of people not bought and paid for, because that changes. I know that I work for a company that works with many, many different clients. And guess what? I think all of our clients do the best that they could possibly, the best in their field. They're all, selling a product, and it's of course the best of that product that is on the market. I'm really excited for it, and I tell all my friends, we got this client, we got that client. I know there's something psychological about that. The fact that they're paying us to work on it makes me think that they're the best in that field. But care, but I can see how that can manipulate your own personal worldview, and so to me, it is nice to be able to work on projects like with people that I know that they're not receiving a large paycheck from any individual. As much as people that are probably true to their beliefs, I see how it can be subtly influenced.
It's a reason it's called the Grifties.
Yeah,
there's a lot of grifting out there.
Oh yeah,
for sure. So I want to start kind of wrapping down. And Taylor,
I have one question for all of you guys before we wrap it down. You guys all watched the Grifties?
Yes.
What was your favorite part this year?
Probably Stein winning because he's so over the top. So that was probably my favorite part, but I like the whole thing.
I would have to say the fucking cat winning the Grifty.
So I'm a little partial. Like I think that this is not to throw any shade at Hotep Jesus and Uncle Hotep or Cannon, who was significantly appearing on there, but every time he has presented the Hall of Fame, Doe Dubes has absolutely killed it. He has crushed that thing, and that to me is it's like, because the other stuff is funny, and that's good, like it's a good awards show in that sense because it's entertaining and it's funny, and they're great when they're riffing off of each other and cracking on each other and cracking on some of the contestants and everything. But when Doe brings it home, and it's just this very professional, and it's just digging into these characters that we've heard about, but maybe we don't know all of those little facts about what they did and how they used people and abused people. It's really valuable, and I think it's a great juxtaposition of something serious in the middle of something that is just supposed to be a funny, entertaining, let your hair down and don't stress out about shit night.
I agree. The Hall of Fame is probably one of my favorite additions, and the fact that Doe does it such in a way that it's encouraging and insulting the characters.
Yes.
It's in comedy and it's serious. It's a joke and it's real. It's definitely one of my favorite segments. And as well, it's like a solid bite of meat that you're gonna take into.
That's it. It's the meat and potatoes, and everything else is like the dessert and the appetizer. You know?
Man, I like the dessert. Alex Stein.
Oh no, it's
phenomenal dessert.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So to kind of draw this down, I wanted to kind of give you, come around to the with the indoctrination chamber and all of that. I prefer, to me, someone who is a pianist is playing piano. Someone who is a ventriloquist is making dolls talk, right? IST. I'm an anarchist. That's not really true. I don't practice anarchy. I just don't. I don't live in an anarchist world. I want to. I'm trying to. I hope to be an anarchist, but I don't. I prefer the term anarch, which breaks down. It's not a new term. It's not something we created, but it's someone who rules themselves. And Taylor, I think that you would agree that you rule yourself, correct?
I mean, my wife might disagree, but
aside from wives,
but you voluntarily,
for sure.
Yeah,
but,
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So see, that makes you one of us.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I'm one of you guys as much as I can possibly be.
Sure.
I like playing with the philosophies. I mean, I get a chance to work on the thing that I love to do about 8 hours a day, which is make videos. And in the background, I've got all my favorite politics stuff going off at 2 times speed for 8 hours a day. I like swimming in those ideas for sure. But at the end of the day, and we talked about it, we all share more than the baseline American values. So I would 100% agree that I'm one of you guys.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you coming here. Do you want to plug anything other than the
No.
Grifties?
No. The Grifties. Don't follow me. I don't live on social media. I do my own thing and help out these people behind the scenes.
Amen.
And I put the links to the Grifties, each episode of the Grifties, in the description. And I would recommend that people go there and subscribe to that channel. Because there's a lot of other stuff there too. There's the Hotep Con documentary that Taylor did from a couple of years ago, or whatever, last year, 2021. And then there's some other stuff, the fireside chats, and some of the other things that they're really good content, just to kind of get a window into what is Hotep Nation, what we're about, and like a little bit more about each of the individuals who was there, who elected to show up on camera. So that's really good stuff there. So go check out that channel and follow it.
For sure. Well, again, we appreciate you. Go ahead, Nicco.
Oh, no, I was just going to say I appreciate you for helping out with the Grifties. I appreciate your knowledge on life and how you pursue to live your pursuit of happiness. Somebody who somebody that like you wouldn't give the benefit of the doubt, like, oh, he might just be a conservative. But no, you most definitely like think outside the box. Like you're somebody who you can't be confined. Like you have a lot more qualities to you than what people would give you. And I appreciate you for divulging some of those qualities and information with us to open our perspective a little bit more in this world of life.
I just wanted to add one final thing. Taylor, I know that you and Chad have become friends. Don't ever hesitate, because Chad and I come from a slightly different background. If you ever have any questions that maybe you want me to field, or if you just want to hang out and say, hey, I got a kid that this and that's going on, and somehow it's something related to me, do not hesitate to reach out. I appreciate all of our Hotep friends, you included.
Don't reach out to Nicco though. He hates.
Yeah, I mean, all I can do is play rock paper scissors with you, man, and like
and Tarot.
Yeah, I can do a reading for you, but then
I was just joking, Nicco. I was making absolutely reach out to Nicco too. But yeah, if Nicco wants you to reach out to him, I don't know.
Yeah, no, we open. Hey, you know what? I might try and see what's up with that. Your parents' Irish, you dig, that's happening in California. I wouldn't know.
I do.
Yeah, if you're ever in Southern California during St. Patrick's Day, you let me know.
You only got a couple of weeks, Nicco. You got about a month, Nicco. You gotta get over there.
Dude, I've been trying to get him to Indianapolis. So I live just outside of Indianapolis. I've been trying to get this dude from Chicago to Indianapolis. He's gonna go to California. Dude.
Everybody's trying to get me somewhere at one point. I wish I had clones. You know any cloning programs?
You don't want that stuff either. It doesn't end
well. The best I can do is Photoshop you somewhere else.
Nice. All right. Well, you guys know what to do. Yeah.
Yes.
Go check out the Grifties, and everybody stay free.
Peace.
And subscribe to the Patreon too. Damn, we need some money.
For sure.
All right, let's go. Peace.